Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. This is author interview number 856. In a moment, we'll meet someone who is himself a meter and greeter because he's a member of the Big Apple Greeter. The group's been pairing visitors with New York City volunteer greeters since 1992. Warm and welcoming, greeters meet up to six people. They share their personal knowledge of New York City's culture, people, and diverse neighborhoods. Now, even though that suits him to a T, Jesse Richards is an artist, an explorer of New York City's urban landscape. For nearly 20 years, he's led one of the city's largest drawing groups, sketching in parks, museums, and hidden sites all over New York City. Now he's put that experience to good use in his new book, Unknown New York. An artist uncovers the city's hidden treasures, which not only delves into those hidden gems, but illustrates each with his original art. Jesse also had experience leading product design and user experience teams at New York-based startups. He lives in New York with his family. We're very pleased to welcome Jesse Richards.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Were you always going to be an artist?
Yeah. Yeah, ever since I was a little kid, I loved art and loved drawing. And I see the same thing in my daughter now, who's 11, and she's very into art and drawing, which is a lot of fun.
Did you grow up in New York?
No, I'm from New Jersey, sort of central Jersey,
Mhm.
um, and moved to New York in 2003. So I've been here over 20 years now.
Wow. And how did this art group grow? Were you teaching at some local school and decided let's go for a walk?
No, I moved to the city and wanted to join some art groups, and at the time couldn't find any that drew the city. The only things you could find were groups that did figure drawing. So if as an artist you wanted to practice drawing naked people, then you were set. But if you wanted to try drawing anything else, there wasn't much to do. So we started off as a tiny group on meetup.com. You can start a group about anything. And met in Central Park, and then soon realized we could branch out and explore a number of different parks and things in the city. In the winter, we go to museums. And just draw all over the city. And the group now has over 8,000 people.
Okay, tell me a little bit about logistics, because that sounds, you aren't going to walk around with 8,000 people following you. Do you have like subgroups or do you rotate among people? How does that work?
I just limit the size of the events. So we get 30 to 50 people
Hmm.
per event, which is still a lot to lead around. But I look for spots that are, lesser known, partly because we won't be disturbed, and they have to be quiet enough and big enough to fit that number of people. And logistically, it's been, I keep it really casual. The group is free, and people can join and drop in, and all range of professional artists to people who have never drawn before at all. So
So do you uh, just give them a destination, everybody congregates there, or do you try to transport people around?
no, everyone meets at wherever we're meeting up. And we've branched out and done some in the other boroughs, but mostly it's in Manhattan, which is much easier for people to get to.
Okay. And I just have the vision is everybody, bringing like the whole plein air setup with a easel and the buckets of paint and all that good stuff?
No, part of what makes my group a little different, because there's a lot of urban sketching groups now in the city, which is great. But what I've always done is kept it very casual, and our sketches are about 45 minutes long. So you don't have much time to set up painting. Some people still do, and they're amazing. Um, but a lot of people just sketch with pencil or with pen, and then we take a look at all the art and share it with each other and take a look. And then maybe walk to another spot nearby and do it again.
Wow, that sounds like just so much fun. Now, you mentioned in here that you've had to go to a slightly different technique because of the time constraints.
Yeah, exactly. I switched years ago to mostly drawing digitally on the iPad.
Mhm.
And a lot of the illustrations in the book are digital watercolors done through an iPad app. And I tested maybe 25 apps before finding one that did watercolors really, really well. So
Well, let's plug it here. Which one is it?
it's called Tayasui Sketches. It's Japanese,
Ah,
Tayasui, which it always confuses people, but that's the name of it, and it's a very cool app.
all right. Well, we're glad to give them a free plug there because obviously it's working for you. Now, in reading a New York, I kind of have an unusual reaction for me. I read lots of books, but this. I feel really comfortable with this and even accessible. And I'm a West Coast guy. The only time I was in New York City was 58 years ago, so it's obviously not familiarity. But I think part of it is scale. You don't do giant, one or two larger things, but you've got that artist's eye focused on a comfortable shot. I can imagine myself being in that scene. Is that something you're going for?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Um, when you have only 45 minutes to draw or an hour, which a lot of these were done in the group,
yeah,
if you say, okay, I'm going to draw the whole skyline, you can't do that.
yeah.
So you have to pick your subject really well. And I want it to feel accessible and down to earth. Like New York is a normal place where lots of different people, average, normal people live in all these neighborhoods and has these interesting things. Yeah.
Now, you've got to talk about some of the interesting things because there were so many wonderful bits in this. And I see the artist's eye at work because in the very first page, I think it is, you mentioned about the Dutch settlement in the tip of Manhattan and that there are windmill motifs honoring this legacy in the architecture. That's eye-catching artist's detail, picking out something like that. And I'll have to say, it reminded me the Baker Street station in the London Underground has an area that features tiles with Sherlock Holmes silhouette on it because his address was 221B Baker Street. That's the kind of somebody's putting that effort in and you're finding it, and that's going to be totally fun.
Yeah, and people have that's one of the amazing things to learn as you uncover history is that there's layers of history below us, no matter where you are, but especially in a dense place like New York, or any city. And everything that we take for granted was designed and built by someone and was deliberately put there, when you're in a human livable place and has stories behind it and has interesting facts and history running behind it that we often take for granted or don't think of. And if you look into it, you can find some of that.
How do you find the places you go to? Do you search them out yourself? Do you have people making suggestions? How does that work?
I'd love to have a team of people, but no, it's just me. Um, one of the things I do is my family and I, my wife and my daughter, we go on what we call family adventures, and we'll just pick a new neighborhood in the city, and I'll look up a couple highlights and where to get ice cream, so my daughter makes sure she gets ice cream, and we'll go and explore that new neighborhood. I find a lot of things that way.
One of the things I have to say, I was only slightly disappointed. We shattered a childhood myth of mine with the surprise on who was buried in Grant's tomb. Now, I'm old enough to have seen Groucho Marx ask that question on his TV show when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And it was his consolation question. He couldn't get anything else right. He answered that, and this seems like an obvious answer, but it's not true. Who is buried in Grant's tomb?
Well, from one point of view, it's Grant, it's Ulysses S. Grant and his wife, but in reality, they're not buried, they're entombed.
Yeah,
So the joke that technically no one is buried there.
yeah, they're in a mausoleum, basically, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So, again, fascinating discovery on that. And again, one of the really nice details. Tell me about the Flatiron Building and the hats. That's amazing.
Yeah, so the Flatiron Building, one of the most beloved skyscrapers, actually was called the Fuller Building originally. When it went up, it was known for these gusts of wind that went around the prow, where the narrow part. And it got a reputation as being a place where ladies' skirts would lift up from the wind, and the policemen would chase men away who were trying to look up ladies' skirts. This is pre-internet, of course.
Yeah,
And that's possibly a myth, but it might be where we got the fad phrase from the 20s, which was 23 Skidoo, because it's on 23rd Street.
um,
And now, sort of to honor that, because Hats blew off too, there's a subway station right there where the tile artwork is all of these different hats from famous people from the early 20th century, like Mark Twain's hat. And the hats are on the wall, made out of tile. They're beautiful at the height of that person, so you can stand there and sort of try their hat on.
it's wonderful detail. And again, this is the magic of the book. You just keep discovering it's a page turner. Now, I'll have to say, I read it in one fantastic sitting and then went back and did it again because it was so entertaining.
It's amazing.
You may be an artist, but you're also a writer as well. Is that something from your background?
Yeah, at school I majored in fine art and I minored in nonfiction writing journalism. So I can't write fiction very well, not my thing, but nonfiction I really do enjoy writing, and I really recommend writing and learning writing skills for everyone because in work and in your day, like it's just useful to know how to write.
And it increases communication if you can write clearly.
Hmm.
One of the lessons you get in reading this is that not everything is as it seems from the outside. There is a building in New York that is not really a building.
Yeah, that's true. In Brooklyn Heights, there's a beautiful street with these townhouses, brownstones built in the 1850s, cobblestone streets. And one of the buildings looks just the same as the rest, except the windows are blacked out, which is like a clue. And it turns out that that building is just a facade. It is not a real house, and it is actually an emergency exit from the subway. And the only people who have access to it are MTA employees. And it also is a vent for steam, and it's just this practical building used for these logistical things, but in order to preserve the integrity of the design of the street, they made it look just like one of these old, beautiful houses.
It's nice to know that somebody at least is looking out for that because that's not always the case these days when people build new structures. That's I want to stand out rather than I would like to blend in. Um, One of the same things that you mentioned also is there are things that came from elsewhere. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but the Shinran statue.
Yeah, yeah, that's a statue that survived the bombing of Hiroshima, or yeah, I believe Hiroshima,
Yeah.
and was donated to New York and now stands on the Upper West Side, and you can see marks on it from the explosion,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
There are some relics of things that happened that weren't good, like that. Also, you talk about St. George's Church and the attempted assassination of one of the major bankers of the early era. Can you share that story with us?
Sure, J.P. Morgan, who we know just from saying J.P. Morgan Chase, the
Mhm.
bank, he was the world's richest man for a time in the early 20th century, and St. George's Church was his church. It was actually known as Morgan's Church because he attended there. And one day, a crazy person came into the congregation shooting and looking to assassinate J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan had a lot of political enemies. He had enemies, sort of anarchists, because there was a sort of anti-capitalist movement. Um, and this guy was looking for him, and he fired randomly. He ended up killing a doctor who was just a member of the congregation. It was terrible. And what he didn't know was that JP Morgan had died 7 years before that. He was not alive. And again, there was no internet.
Yeah. This is
So this,
one of the gems is that there's all these little stories, and this one has a beautiful capper at the end of it. So it's like, okay, whoa, here's the twist. You're M. Night Shyamalan again doing something with a story that small. Um, what do you hope that people take away when they close the book at the end of reading it?
I think two things. One is to not take for granted the world around us and to keep your eyes open to see interesting things, no matter where you live. The other is about New York specifically, that I hope people, and this is what I do when I take tourists around, uh, realize that the perception of New York in the media might be different than what the reality of New York is. People sometimes come to Times Square. It's crazy. They're like, oh my God, I could never live here. Well, no one lives in Times Square. They live in these beautiful neighborhoods all around it, these diverse places that are just rich with history. And I love showing around just sort of the casual neighborhood of this is how people live in the city. And this is the amount of beauty and interesting things that you can find.
Do you have a favorite? Have you a go-to spot that if they said tomorrow you need to lead a group here, where would you go?
One is Block Beautiful, which is also right near Gramercy Park, both of which are great. Um, There's a block, 19th Street between 3rd and Irving, that is literally called Block Beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's just got this range of different architecture, where the different buildings have been sort of customized in different styles. And over the years, it's attracted a number of creative people to live on the street that made the buildings even more creative. And it's just got this mix of architecture and landscaping that goes together really well to create this picturesque street.
Will there be Unknown New York 2, the son of the city's hidden treasures?
If everyone watching this buys a copy,
Okay. All
maybe
right.
we could.
We can do that maybe. Let's tell the people where they can find you and where they can find the book.
Sure.
Anything you want to share with those?
Yeah, sure. So the book is Unknown New York. You can find it wherever books are sold. I just saw it in Barnes and Noble yesterday. You can get it on Amazon, wherever you like. And you can follow me on Instagram as Secret Sketch NYC, or look up my name, Jesse Richards. And that's where I post my artwork and things like that.
Well, I want to thank you for your generous amount of sharing time with us this morning and with your art and with your stories. It's been a real pleasure. Our guest this morning, Jesse Richards, Unknown New York, an artist uncovers the city's hidden treasures. Wonderful book. Go out and buy multiple copies. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.